Hi everyone. Welcome to Lunar Sleeping Studio. The rain began as a whisper, soft and patient, tapping against the leaves and the old wooden roof, as if the night itself were trying to tell a secret meant only for those willing to close their eyes and listen. And that gentle sound, where every drop felt like a slow breath, a story was waiting to unfold, a story meant for tired hearts, wandering minds, and souls ready to drift into sleep. Akinosuke lay on his futon, staring at the dark ceiling of his small countryside home. Outside, the rain wrapped the village in silver threads, blurring lantern lights and softening the edges of the world. He turned on his side and sighed, the kind of sigh that carried years of quiet disappointment. He was no longer young, yet his life felt unfinished, like a sentence abandoned halfway. His days were ordinary, his nights restless, and his dreams had grown faint with time. Another night like this, he murmured softly, his voice barely louder than the rain. Another day gone. The room smelled of damp earth and old wood. A small oil lamp flickered beside him, its flame trembling with each distant roll of thunder. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and shrinking like memories that refused to stay still. Akinosuke closed his eyes, hoping sleep would come quickly. But his mind wandered, drifting through regrets and quiet wishes he rarely allowed himself to name. He thought of the life he once imagined, a life filled with purpose, honor, and meaning. He remembered being younger, standing beneath the same sky, believing that something extraordinary awaited him beyond the hills. But years had passed like falling leaves, one season after another, until hope had become something fragile, carefully folded and stored away. The rain grew steadier, its rhythm slow and soothing. Somewhere outside, water streamed along narrow paths, pooling beneath the old tree near his home, a tree that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. Its branches swayed gently, leaves brushing together as if whispering among themselves. Akinosuke felt his breathing begin to match the rain. In, out, slow and even. His eyelids grew heavy, his thoughts softer, less sharp. The world narrowed to sound and sensation, to the warmth of his blanket and the cool night air brushing his face through a cracked window. Just as sleep was about to claim him, a distant sound rose above the rain. A faint voice carried on the wind, gentle and unfamiliar. He frowned slightly, unsure if he was dreaming already. Is someone there? He whispered, though he made no effort to rise. The voice faded, replaced by the deeper hush of rainfall. Akinosuke relaxed again, telling himself it was nothing, just the night playing tricks on a tired mind. His body sank further into the futon, muscles loosening, thoughts unraveling. In his half-dreaming state, he found himself standing, not in his room, but beneath the old tree outside his home. The rain no longer felt cold. It shimmered, glowing faintly as it fell, each drop like a tiny lantern. The ground beneath his feet was firm and dry, and the air carried a sweetness he had never known. He looked around slowly, heart calm but curious. The village was gone. In its place stood a vast open field stretching endlessly, bathed in soft moonlight. The old tree loomed behind him, its trunk wider, its roots deeper, as if it had grown into something ancient and powerful. Akinosuke reached out and touched the bark. It was warm. This is strange, he said quietly, his voice echoing more than it should have. I must be dreaming. As if in answer, the tree stirred. The branches creaked, not with age, but with intention. From within the trunk came a low, steady hum, like a heartbeat. Akinosuke stepped back, unsure whether to run or stay, yet feeling no fear, only a deep pull, as though this place had been waiting for him. The rain slowed, each drop falling with deliberate grace. Time itself seemed to stretch, becoming thick and gentle. Akinosuke felt lighter, as if the weight he had carried for years was slowly lifting from his chest. From beyond the field, faint lights appeared, drifting closer, like fireflies guided by unseen hands. They formed a path leading away from the tree, glowing softly against the dark earth. Akinosuke swallowed and took a careful step forward. "Where does this lead?" he asked the knight. No answer came, yet something within him understood that this was an invitation, not a command. A chance, perhaps, to step into something he had long forgotten how to seek. Behind him, the tree hummed once more, deeper now, almost approving. The rain resumed its gentle song, wrapping the world in calm. Akinosuke followed the lights, each step steady, his heart strangely peaceful. Whatever waited ahead felt important, as though his quiet, ordinary life was about to brush against something vast and unseen. And as he walked, the rain whispered around him, promising rest, reflection, and a journey that would test the meaning of dreams, time, and the choices that shape a soul. The night held its breath, and the dream carried him forward. The sound of water no longer fell from the sky, yet a calm hush filled the air, as if the world itself were wrapped in a deep, patient sleep. Akinosuke continued forward, the glowing path beneath his feet fading with every step he took, replaced by smooth ground that felt warm and alive. He realized then that he could no longer hear his own breathing, yet his chest felt full, steady, unburdened. Ahead, shapes slowly formed out of the dimness. Tall gates emerged, carved from pale stone, rising so high they seemed to touch the clouds. Their surface shimmered faintly, etched with patterns that moved when he tried to focus on them. Beyond the gates, soft music drifted outward, not loud, not clear, but gentle enough to settle deep inside his chest. Akinosuke stopped a short distance away, his heart stirring with a mix of wonder and uncertainty. He had never seen such a place, yet something about it felt familiar, like a memory from a life he had never lived. As he stood there, the gates began to part on their own, slowly and silently. From within, a warm golden glow spilled outward, bathing him in light. The music grew clearer, and with it came voices, calm and welcoming. A group of figures approached. They wore flowing garments that moved like mist, their faces kind, their eyes filled with quiet knowing. One stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Traveler," the figure said, voice smooth and gentle, "you have arrived at a crossing meant for those who wander between waking and rest." Akinosuke blinked, surprised by how natural the words felt. "I don't know how I came here," he replied honestly. "I was only trying to sleep." A soft smile spread across the figure's face. That is often how such journeys begin. The others nodded in silent agreement. One of them gestured toward the open gates. "Please follow us. Someone has been waiting." Akinosuke hesitated, glancing back at the darkness behind him. The path he had followed was gone. There was no tree, no field, no trace of where he had started. Only the open gates remained. With a quiet breath, he stepped forward. Inside, the world unfolded into a vast city unlike anything he had known. Towers curved gracefully toward the sky, their surfaces glowing softly as if lit from within. Streams of clear water flowed through the streets, reflecting the lights above like moving mirrors. The air was calm, carrying a faint scent of flowers after rain. People passed by, their movements slow and peaceful. They spoke softly, laughed gently, and walked with purpose, yet without hurry. No one seemed burdened, no one rushed or looked away. Akinosuke felt his shoulders relax without realizing they had been tense for years. "Where is this place?" he asked, his voice hushed. "A realm shaped by longing and time." One of the guides answered, "A place that exists beyond ordinary days." They led him through winding paths until they reached a wide hall supported by tall pillars. At its center stood a throne crafted from light and shadow, changing subtly with each passing moment. Upon it sat a dignified figure, calm and watchful, eyes deep as still water. The guide stepped aside and bowed low. Akinosuke felt an unexpected pull to kneel, and he did so without being asked. The figure rose and approached him slowly. You have traveled far without moving." The voice said, steady and warm, "Tell me, Akinosuke, what is it you seek?" Hearing his own name spoken sent a quiet shiver through him. He searched his heart for an answer, realizing he had avoided this question his entire life. "I don't know anymore," he said at last. "I once wanted greatness, then I only wanted peace. Now, I think I want to understand why my life feels unfinished." The figure studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you have come at the right moment," the voice replied. "Your dream has opened a door, but what lies beyond will test how you see time, success, and yourself." The whole seemed to breathe around them, light shifting like slow wave. Akinosuke lifted his head, curiosity burning quietly within him. "What happens now?" he asked. The figure turned and gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the glowing city. "Now," the voice said gently, "you begin living the dream you never dared to imagine." As the words settled, the city lights pulsed softly, and Akinosuke rose to his feet, unaware that every step he was about to take would carry a lesson that could only be learned by losing oneself inside a dream. A hush settled over the glowing city as Akinosuke moved forward, his footsteps echoing faintly along the smooth passageway. The corridor stretched far ahead, curving gently, its walls alive with shifting colors that flowed like slow, moving clouds. Each breath he took felt deeper than the last, as though the air itself was teaching him how to be calm. At the far end, the passage opened into a wide chamber where countless lanterns hovered without strings. Their light pulsed softly, rising and falling like a steady tide. Beneath them stood several attendants, waiting in silence, their expressions peaceful yet focused. One stepped toward him, holding a simple robe the color of early morning sky. "Your former garments belong to another place," the attendant said quietly. "Here you will walk in a new role." Akinosuke looked down and realized his old clothes were gone. He felt no shock, no panic, only a gentle acceptance. He reached out and took the robe, slipping it on. It fit perfectly, light and warm, as if woven for him alone. "What role is that?" he asked. The attendant inclined their head, one of trust, one of responsibility. Before he could speak again, the lanterns drifted higher, and the chamber's floor began to glow. Lines of light traced paths outward, forming images beneath his feet. Scenes appeared, fields under changing skies, rivers flowing through villages, people gathering, working, and resting. "These are moments shaped by choice," the attendant continued. "You will be asked to guide them." Akinosuke's heart stirred uneasily. "I've never guided anyone," he said. "My own life feels uncertain." A soft chuckle rippled through the chamber, not mocking, but kind. "Those who doubt themselves often see most clearly." The images beneath him shifted. He saw a small settlement bordered by water and stone. Its people moved with quiet harmony, yet there was a sense of waiting, like a breath held too long. "This place will be under your care," the attendant said. "Not forever, but long enough for you to learn." Before Akinosuke could ask how or why, the light around him brightened suddenly. The lanterns spun gently, and the chamber faded like mist under sunlight. When clarity returned, he stood beneath an open sky tinted gold and blue. Warm air brushed his face, carrying distant voices and the scent of earth and grain. He looked around and saw the settlement from the vision, now real and alive. People noticed him at once. They paused in their work, whispering to one another, eyes filled with hope rather than fear. An older man approached, bowing deeply. "You have come at last," the man said, voice trembling with relief. "We have awaited your arrival." Akinosuke stepped back slightly. "I think you may be mistaken," he replied. "I am no leader." The man smiled, straightening. "Greatness rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly." Others gathered, offering respectful greetings, warm glances, and open smiles. Someone placed a simple symbol into his hands, smooth and cool. carved with patterns that matched the glowing city's designs. "This marks your stewardship," the man explained. "Our future now rests in part with you." Akinosuke held the symbol, feeling its weight settle not in his hands but in his chest. He looked at the people before him, their trust so freely given, and felt a stirring he had not known in years. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land, Akinosuke realized something had shifted within him. For the first time in a long while, he was not watching life pass by. He was standing inside it. Unseen, time began to fold itself differently around him, preparing lessons that would feel like years, yet pass like moments, all within the fragile boundaries of a single, sleeping mind. Soft light stretched across the land as the sun lowered itself behind distant hills, painting the sky in shades that felt calm yet unfamiliar to Akinosuke. He stood at the edge of the settlement, the carved symbol still resting in his palm, its surface warm as if it carried a pulse of its own. Voices drifted around him, low, respectful, hopeful, and with every sound, the weight of expectation settled deeper into his being. He was guided through narrow paths lined with stone and wood, past homes where gentle fires glowed behind paper windows. Faces appeared briefly, offering quiet nods, careful smiles, eyes filled with trust that felt both comforting and frightening. Children paused mid-step to watch him pass, curiosity bright in their gaze. Elders leaned on staffs, whispering blessings he could not fully hear, but somehow understood. They brought him to a modest dwelling near the heart of the settlement. It was neither grand nor poor, but balanced, steady, as if designed to remind its occupant of humility. Inside, the space was clean and open. A low table stood near the center, and beyond it, sliding doors opened to a small garden where water trickled softly over smooth stones. "This will be where you rest," said a woman who had walked beside him in silence. Her voice carried calm strength. "And where you will decide." "Decide what?" Akinosuke asked, turning toward her. She met his eyes without hesitation. "What kind of guidance you will offer. Authority alone shapes nothing. Intention shapes everything." With that, she bowed and withdrew, leaving him alone with the fading daylight. Akinosuke lowered himself onto the floor, setting the symbol before him. His reflection shimmered faintly on its surface, unfamiliar yet somehow clearer than the face he remembered from waking life. He pressed his fingers together, realizing they did not ache the way they used to. His body felt renewed, lighter, as if time had loosened its grip. Outside, the settlement settled into evening rhythm. Lamps were lit, voices softened, footsteps slowed. A breeze carried the scent of cooked grain and warm earth. Akinosuke closed his eyes briefly, listening, letting the sounds anchor him. Soon, a soft knock echoed through the room. He opened the doors to find several people standing together. The older man from earlier stepped forward, his expression serious but not fearful. "There is a matter requiring your attention," the man said. "Not urgent, but important." They led Akinosuke toward the outskirts, where fields met water. There, a narrow channel fed the settlement's crops. Recently, the flow had weakened. The land was still fertile, but uncertainty had begun to spread. "We have always shared the water equally," one voice explained, "but seasons change. We are unsure how to prepare." Akinosuke looked at the channel, watching the water move slowly, patiently. He felt no sudden answer rise within him, only a quiet awareness. He knelt, touched the ground, felt its cool firmness. "In my other life," he began slowly, surprising himself with the honesty of his words, "I spent many years believing answers should come quickly. They rarely did, but listening often revealed more than deciding." The people watched him closely. "Let us observe before we alter," he continued. "Measure the flow, learn its pattern. Acting without understanding may harm what still lives." Murmurs spread through the group, thoughtful, relieved. The older man nodded. "Then we will wait and watch." As they dispersed, Akinosuke remained by the water. Moonlight reflected along its surface, creating trembling lines that reminded him of the rain from his first steps into this strange journey. A feeling stirred within him, not pride but purpose, small, steady, growing. Days followed, though they did not feel like days. Moments expanded, yet never dragged. Akinosuke learned the rhythms of the settlement, listening more than speaking, observing more than commanding. He discovered that guidance was less about control and more about presence. Each evening, as darkness returned and lights flickered on, he would sit quietly, sensing time stretching and folding in ways he could not explain. He did not know how long he had been there or how long he would remain. Yet something within him began to heal, piece by piece. Unseen beyond the settlement, the dream continued shaping itself, preparing trials not of hardship alone, but of attachment, ambition, and the fragile line between fulfillment and illusion. Morning arrived without urgency, carried on a pale glow that crept gently across the land. Akinosuke stood near the edge of the garden, watching thin mist rise from the ground as if the earth itself were exhaling. The settlement awakened slowly. Doors slid open. Quiet greetings passed between neighbors. Soft footsteps traced familiar routes. Everything moved with purpose yet without strain, a harmony that felt earned rather than forced. He had begun to notice subtle changes within himself. His thoughts no longer raced ahead or clung to the past. Instead, they unfolded calmly, shaped by what he saw and heard. People approached him not with fear, but with trust, and that trust pressed upon him like a responsibility far heavier than command. Later that day, a gathering was called near the central square. Word had spread of a disagreement between two families, one that had grown quietly over time. Akinosuke arrived to find them standing apart, their expressions tense, voices low but sharp. Those nearby kept their distance, unsure how to help without worsening the divide. An older woman stepped forward first. Her eyes held years of effort and fatigue. "We have tended our land carefully," she said. "Now our neighbor claims part of it belongs to them. This soil fed my children." The other family responded with equal firmness. "The boundary shifted when the floods came years ago. We adapted as everyone must." Akinosuke listened, allowing silence to linger after each voice. He walked slowly between them, his steps deliberate, his gaze steady. "And my life before this place," he said gently. "I often believed fairness meant choosing one side. I learned too late that fairness sometimes means understanding both." He asked them to walk with him to the land in question. They did so reluctantly, their frustration trailing behind them like shadows. At the sight, the earth bore signs of both histories. Old markers softened by time, new paths carved by necessity. Akinosuke knelt, brushing his hand across the soil. "This ground has changed because life demanded it," he said. "Holding tightly to the past may feel safe, but it can also trap us." He proposed a shared approach, rotating care of the land, sharing its yield, acknowledging both effort and adaptation. The idea was met with silence, then hesitant consideration. "It will require trust," one voice said quietly. "Yes," Akinosuke replied, "and trust is built by action, not words." By sunset, agreement had been reached. Not perfect, but willing. As the families departed together, something unseen loosened within the settlement, like a knot slowly undone. That evening, Akinosuke sat alone near the water channel again. Reflections rippled across the surface, bending the shapes of the stars. He felt satisfaction, but it was gentle, not loud. Still, beneath it stirred a new sensation: attachment. People began seeking him more frequently. They brought offerings not demanded but given freely: woven cloth, fresh grain, small tokens carved with care. Children followed him through paths, laughing softly. Elders spoke of stability returning. With each passing moment, Akinosuke felt himself settling deeper into this role. The life he had once imagined, respected, meaningful, seemed to be forming around him, quietly and completely. One night, as lamps glowed and voices faded, he dreamed within the dream. He saw himself standing beneath the old tree again, rain falling gently around him. But now, the image felt distant, like a story told long ago. He woke with a faint ache in his chest, unable to name it. Time continued its strange behavior. Seasons shifted without sharp edges. Growth and harvest blended seamlessly. Akinosuke's hair seemed unchanged, his body steady, while those around him aged naturally, marking years he could not count. With comfort came subtle pride. With belonging came fear of loss. He did not yet realize that the dream, so generous in its gifts, would soon ask a question far more difficult than any dispute or decision. What happens when fulfillment itself becomes a chain, and the heart forgets the world it came from? A quiet shift unfolded across the settlement, subtle enough that most did not notice it at first. The air carried a different weight, not heavy, but watchful, as though something unseen had opened its eyes. Akinosuke sensed it during moments of stillness, in pauses between voices, in the way birds sometimes fell silent without warning. He walked through the paths one evening as twilight stretched long shadows across the ground. Lamps were being lit one by one, their glow softer than before, less celebratory. People greeted him with the same respect, yet something new lingered in their expressions, expectation mixed with reliance. They no longer simply sought guidance, they leaned on it. Akinosuke felt it settle on him like a cloak he had not chosen but now wore daily. Near the edge of the settlement, he noticed a young man standing alone, staring toward the distant hills. His posture was rigid, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. Akinosuke approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "You've been standing here a long time," Akinosuke said gently. The young man exhaled, shoulders dropping slightly. "I didn't realize anyone noticed. Being seen is not the same as being understood." Akinosuke replied, "What weighs on you?" The young man hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "I want to leave. There is more beyond these lands, but my family believes my duty is here. They say abandoning this place would betray everything you've helped build." Akinosuke listened, feeling a faint echo of his former self in those words. "And what do you believe?" "I believe staying feels safe," the young man said, "but safety feels smaller every day." Silence stretched between them. Akinosuke looked toward the hills, their outlines blurred by evening haze. For a moment, the image of his old home flickered faintly in his mind, then slipped away. Growth often demands distance, Akinosuke said slowly, yet distance always carries cost. Only you can decide which price you're willing to pay. The young man nodded, eyes thoughtful, not relieved, but steadier. He bowed slightly before departing, leaving Akinosuke alone beneath the darkening sky. That night, Akinosuke slept lightly. Images rose and faded, paths splitting into countless directions, doors opening and closing, reflections that did not always match his movements. He woke before dawn, unsettled. As days unfolded, challenges grew more complex. Not conflicts of land or water, but of belief and identity. People sought reassurance for choices they feared making alone. Akinosuke offered patience, yet felt his own certainty thinning. He began to realize that his presence had shifted the settlement's balance. Where once people adapted together, now they paused, waiting for his voice. The harmony he had admired was slowly reshaping itself around him, narrowing rather than expanding. One afternoon, a sudden tremor rippled through the ground, gentle but unmistakable. Structures held firm, yet the water channels stirred, their surfaces trembling. Fear spread quickly, whispers rising like wind through dry grass. Akinosuke moved through the gathering crowd, raising his hands calmly. "This place is steady," he said. "We will observe before we react." The words soothed them, but as calm returned, a sharp realization struck him. They believed him without question. Later, alone near the garden, he felt unease deepen. He knelt, pressing his palm against the earth, seeking the grounding he once found there. This time, the ground felt distant, as though responding politely rather than warmly. For the first time since arriving, doubt pierced him clearly. "Have I helped?" he whispered, "or have I replaced something they once carried within themselves?" The breeze offered no answer. That evening, an unfamiliar figure arrived at the settlement's edge. Their presence did not draw attention immediately. They walked quietly, eyes observant, movements deliberate. When they finally approached Akinosuke, he felt a strange recognition, like a memory brushing against him from behind. "You have grown comfortable," the figure said softly. Akinosuke studied them. Their face was calm, ageless. Their voice neither critical nor kind. "Comfort is not a crime," he replied. "No," the figure agreed. "But it is often a distraction." They gestured toward the settlement. "You have learned much here, yet learning is not the same as remembering." Akinosuke's chest tightened, remembering what? The figure met his gaze steadily. "That this place exists because you are sleeping." The words struck gently, yet with force. Akinosuke felt the world tilt, just slightly, as though the ground beneath the dream had shifted. Before he could respond, the figure stepped back into the dimness, fading as quietly as they had arrived. Akinosuke remained where he stood, heart beating slowly, heavily. Around him, life continued. Voices, lights, warmth. But something essential had cracked open. For the first time since entering this realm, he wondered not how long he would remain, but what might be lost if he stayed too long, and whether waking would feel like escape or grief. A slow hush settled over the land, deeper than any night before, as though the world itself had drawn a careful breath. Akinosuke walked beneath a sky, washed in muted silver, the air cool against his skin, carrying a faint echo of the stranger's words. Each step felt heavier, not from weariness, but from awareness. The place around him remained gentle, familiar, yet something invisible now pressed between him and everything he touched. He passed homes where soft light glowed behind thin walls. Inside, families shared meals, laughter low and steady, their lives flowing onward without pause. Normally, the sight would have filled him with quiet pride. This time, a different sensation stirred. Distance. Not separation, but a sense of standing slightly outside a moment he once stood within. At the far end of the settlement, near the open fields, he stopped. The horizon stretched endlessly, colors blending into one another, neither fully dark nor bright. He remembered the young man who had spoken of leaving, of longing for something beyond safety. At the time, Akinosuke had offered calm guidance. Now, he felt the weight of those words turning inward. He lowered himself onto the ground, knees drawn close, hands resting loosely in his lap. Closing his eyes, he listened, not for voices but for himself. At first, there was only silence. Then, slowly, faint impressions rose. The rhythm of rain against a roof, the smell of damp soil, a small room dimly lit, a body lying still. His eyes opened sharply. The images vanished, but their echo remained, pulsing gently in his chest. He had not thought of that room in a long while, not since this place had filled his senses so completely. The memory felt fragile now, like something that might slip away if not held carefully. Footsteps approached. A woman he recognized, one who often spoke on behalf of others, stood a short distance away. Her expression held concern, but also resolve. "You seem distant," she said quietly. "Is something troubling you?" Akinosuke searched for an answer that would not unsettle her. "Sometimes," he replied slowly, "even calm water hides strong currents." She considered his words. "People rely on you. she said, "Your presence steadies us." Her honesty struck him more deeply than praise ever could. "And if I were gone?" he asked. She paused. "Then we would have to stand differently," she said at last, "but I hope the day is far away." After she left, Akinosuke remained still. Her words were not pleading, yet they carried attachment. He realized then how tightly his existence had woven itself into the fabric of this place. As days unfolded, signs appeared that he could no longer ignore. The light shifted oddly at times, stretching shadows where none should be. Sounds echoed a moment too long. Faces blurred briefly as though painted on water. No one else seemed to notice. During one quiet afternoon, he found the carved symbol he had been given resting where he had placed it long ago. He lifted it, expecting warmth. Instead, it felt neutral, almost empty. He turned it in his hands, tracing its patterns, and sensed something loosening. That night, rest did not come easily. When his eyes finally closed, he found himself standing between two places. On one side, the settlement glowed softly, alive with warmth and connection. On the other, a faint outline of his old world shimmered, uncertain, quiet, unfinished. A voice, neither loud nor soft, spoke without direction. "What do you carry with you?" He tried to answer, but words failed. Images filled the space instead. Faces of those he had guided, choices made, harmony preserved. Then other images surfaced, missed chances, unanswered questions. A life paused rather than lived. "I wanted meaning," he said finally. "I wanted to matter. And now," the voice asked. Akinosuke looked between the two worlds. "Now I fear forgetting where meaning begins." The space trembled gently. The vision faded. He awoke before dawn, heart steady but resolved. Outside, the land rested in silence, unaware of the decision forming within him. Akinosuke stood, feeling the ground beneath his feet, feeling time move differently around him. He understood now that this place, for all its beauty, was shaped by longing. It reflected desire, amplified purpose, softened pain, but it was not meant to replace the waking world. It was a lesson, not a destination. As the first light touched the horizon, Akinosuke stepped forward, unsure of what leaving, or staying, would demand, but certain that the dream had begun to ask for more than comfort. And somewhere beyond sight, beyond sound, the rain waited patiently, ready to remind him where the journey truly began. A pale stillness lingered after sunrise, not bright, not dim, but suspended, as though the world had paused to watch what Akinosuke might do next. He walked slowly through the settlement, sensing how every surface responded differently now. Stone felt cooler, wood seemed less welcoming. Even the air carried a faint resistance, like a gentle hand asking him not to rush. People greeted him as always, yet he noticed how their voices softened when they spoke to him, how their eyes searched his face before making choices. The realization pressed quietly against his thoughts. His presence had become a mirror they no longer trusted themselves to look into alone. He stopped beside a stream that curved through the land, its surface smooth and reflective. Kneeling, he gazed into the water. The face looking back at him appeared calm, strong, fulfilled, yet unfamiliar. He tilted his head slightly, watching the image bend and stretch. "Who are you now?" he whispered. The water answered only by moving on. Later that day, a council gathered, though none called it such. People arrived one by one, sitting in a loose circle, waiting patiently. No one spoke until Akinosuke settled among them. That silence, heavy with expectation, unsettled him more than conflict ever had. A middle-aged farmer cleared his throat. "We face a decision," he began. "The outer fields could be expanded. It would bring more harvest, more security, but it would also change how we live." Others nodded, eyes turning to Akinosuke. He felt the familiar pull to respond, to weigh options, to guide. Yet something inside him resisted. Instead of speaking, he closed his eyes briefly, listening to the quiet hum beneath the moment. "What do you think?" he asked, opening his eyes again. The circle shifted. People exchanged glances, unsure. One woman spoke hesitantly. "We have not decided without you in a long time." Akinosuke's chest tightened, not with pride but concern. "Then perhaps it is time to try," he said gently. Murmurs rippled outward, uncertain but thoughtful. Slowly, voices rose, different ideas, worries, hopes. The conversation stumbled at first, but gradually found rhythm. Akinosuke listened, offering no conclusion, only questions when clarity was needed. When the gathering ended, no final decision had been made. Yet something else had changed. People left talking among themselves, animated, engaged. The land did not feel steadier, but it felt more alive. As evening approached, Akinosuke felt both lighter and lonelier. He wandered beyond familiar paths, drawn toward the distant hills. With each step, the settlement's sounds faded, replaced by wind brushing tall grass. The horizon shimmered faintly, as if the world there were thinner. He stopped when the ground beneath his feet felt different, not softer, but less certain. The air vibrated subtly, carrying a distant echo. Without warning, the scene around him wavered. For a moment, he stood between two breaths. One belonged to this place, warm, shaped by connection. The other belonged to somewhere else, cool, quiet, unresolved. A figure emerged ahead, the same presence that had spoken before, neither threatening nor kind. "You have begun to loosen your grip," the figure observed. "I never meant to hold so tightly," Akinosuke replied. "Intent does not erase consequence," the figure said calmly, "but awareness changes direction." Akinosuke looked back toward the settlement. "If I leave, will it vanish?" The figure shook their head. "It will remain as it was meant to be, a reflection, not a refuge. And if I stay, then reflection becomes replacement." The figure answered, "And you will forget why you entered sleep at all." The words settled slowly, like sediment in clear water. That night, rest came in fragments. He dreamed of walking through rain again, but this time his feet never touched the ground. He drifted, weightless, listening to distant thunder that sounded like a heartbeat. He awoke with resolve that felt neither urgent nor forced. The next morning, he gathered a few people, not as an authority, but as a voice among others. "I will be stepping away for a time," he said. "Not because I no longer care, but because you must remember how to care without me." Questions rose, concern flickered, but he did not offer reassurance. He trusted them with the uncertainty. As the day stretched on, Akinosuke prepared quietly. He carried nothing with him, not the symbol, not the role he had worn so comfortably, only awareness, steady and clear. When twilight arrived, he stood once more near the edge of the land, facing the thinning horizon. Behind him, life continued, softer now, less dependent. Ahead, the boundary shimmered. He took one step forward, and the world held its breath. A quiet tremble moved through the edge of the world as Akinosuke crossed into the thinning space, not with haste, but with calm acceptance. The ground beneath him no longer felt solid or soft. It felt undecided, as though it had not yet chosen what it wanted to be. Each step carried him farther from familiarity and deeper into something undefined. Behind him, the settlement blurred, its shapes dissolving into muted tones. Voices faded into a distant murmur, then into memory. Ahead, there was no clear path, only a gentle pull, like gravity without weight. The air shimmered faintly, layered with whispers that did not form words. Akinosuke paused, not from fear, but from reflection. For the first time since this strange journey began, he felt truly alone, not isolated, but unaccompanied. No expectations pressed upon him. No faces searched his for answers. The silence was complete, and within it, his thoughts rose clearly. He remembered the first night, the quiet room, the steady rainfall, the heaviness in his chest that had followed him into sleep. That version of himself felt distant now, yet not gone. It lingered somewhere beneath the calm he had learned here. The space around him shifted again. Light bent strangely, stretching into long, slow waves. Shapes formed and unformed, like ideas trying to decide whether to exist. Akinosuke realized that time no longer moved forward here. It hovered, waiting. From the shimmering haze, scenes emerged, one after another, not as visions to watch, but as moments to step into. He found himself standing in a younger body, shoulders tense, eyes filled with longing. He watched that version of himself hesitate at the edge of opportunity, choosing safety over risk. The scene changed. Another moment surfaced, years later, where resignation had replaced hope, where dreams were folded away carefully to avoid pain. Akinosuke felt no judgment toward these images, only understanding. "I was afraid," he said softly. The space around him responded, not with sound, but with warmth. Another scene appeared, brighter this time. He saw the settlement again, not as a place of harmony, but as a reflection of his desire to matter, to be seen, to be needed. He understood now why it had felt so complete. It was shaped by the parts of himself he had neglected. "You gave me what I asked for," he whispered to the unseen presence around him. A gentle pressure passed through the air, like acknowledgement. "But not what I truly needed," he continued. The scenes dissolved, leaving him once more in the undefined space. A sense of balance settled within him. Not relief, not sorrow, but clarity. He understood that fulfillment gained without struggle could soften into illusion. Meaning required friction, uncertainty, and choice. A subtle sound emerged then, barely audible at first. A steady rhythm, slow and familiar. It took him a moment to recognize it. Rain, not the rain of the settlement, glowing and gentle, but something deeper, heavier. The sound carried memory, weight, and reality. With it came sensation, coolness on skin, the scent of wet earth, the creak of wood. The undefined space began to thin, its shimmer breaking apart like mist under morning light. Akinosuke felt a pull, stronger now, drawing him not forward, but inward. His breathing changed. He became aware of it again, low, then uneven, then steadying. His chest rose and fell with effort. The world reassembled itself around him. He opened his eyes to darkness broken by faint, flickering light. The old oil lamp glowed beside him, its flame dancing gently. Rain tapped against the roof, steady and real. The familiar scent of damp wood filled the room. Akinosuke lay still, letting sensation return fully. His body felt heavier than before, older but grounded. The weight did not frighten him, it anchored him. He sat up slowly, heart calm, mind clear. The room felt smaller than he remembered, yet more honest. No glowing paths, no hovering lanterns, just quiet, rain and breath. For a moment, grief brushed against him, not sharp but soft. The settlement, the people, the role he had carried, they were gone. Yet their lessons remained, settled deep within him. He rose and moved toward the window, opening it slightly. Cool air rushed in, carrying the sound of falling water and distant thunder. He closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. "I am awake," he said quietly. The words felt true. Outside, the night continued its patient rhythm. Inside, something had shifted forever. Akinosuke did not feel complete, but he felt present. The dream had not given him answers. It had given him awareness. And as the rain continued to fall, he understood that the real journey, uncertain, unfinished, and deeply human, was finally ready to begin. The night stretched onward, slow and patient, as the steady drizzle traced gentle lines across the darkness. Akinosuke remained near the window, not watching the world outside, but sensing it, letting the cool breath of the evening settle against his face. Each drop that struck the earth sounded heavier now, fuller, as if carrying meaning he had never noticed before. He closed the window and turned back into the room. The small space felt unchanged, yet everything about it seemed different. The walls no longer pressed inward. The silence did not feel empty, it felt honest. He lowered himself onto the floor, resting his hands on his knees, grounding himself in the weight of his own body. Images from the dream lingered at the edges of his thoughts, not sharp enough to disturb him. yet clear enough to guide him. Faces without names, voices without sound, moments that felt distant and close at the same time. He understood now that they were not meant to be held tightly. They were meant to pass through him, leaving traces rather than attachments. As the hours slipped by, his breathing slowed. Sleep returned, but it was lighter this time, closer to rest than escape. When his eyes opened again, a pale glow filtered through the cracks in the shutters. Dawn had arrived. He rose carefully, joints stiff yet familiar. Outside, the rain had softened into a mist, hovering low over the ground. The village beyond his home stirred faintly, footsteps on damp paths, doors opening, distant voices greeting the morning. Akinosuke stepped outside. The air carried a chill that sharpened his senses. The old tree stood nearby, its leaves heavy with moisture, its trunk darkened by the night's long soaking. He approached it slowly, placing a hand against its bark. It felt ordinary, and yet his chest tightened with quiet recognition. Not of magic, not of hidden passageways, but of continuity. This tree had always been here. It had not changed because he dreamed. It had waited. He smiled faintly. As the morning unfolded, Akinosuke moved through his routine simple tasks, familiar motions. He warmed tea, swept the floor, opened his door to the day. Neighbors passed, nodding politely, unaware of the journey he had taken without leaving his home. Yet something subtle shifted in how he saw them. Each face carried weight now, not of expectation, but of shared uncertainty. Each voice sounded layered, shaped by hopes and doubts that no dream could erase. Later, as the mist lifted, Akinosuke walked along the narrow path beyond the village. Water pooled in small hollows, reflecting the sky in broken pieces. He stopped often, not because he was tired, but because he noticed more. The way light bent around leaves, the way sound traveled after rain. He remembered how, in the dream, people had leaned on him for direction. Here, no one asked anything of him, and strangely, that freedom felt heavier than authority ever had. A man passed him on the path, carrying tools over his shoulder. "Morning," the man said simply. "Morning," Akinosuke replied. They continued on without conversation, yet the exchange lingered. No reverence, no expectation, just acknowledgement. It felt grounding. As the day progressed, small challenges appeared. A loose roof tile needed fixing. A neighbor argued with another over shared space. The kind of moments that once felt exhausting now felt instructive. Akinosuke listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were careful, not because he feared being wrong, but because he respected the weight of choice. By afternoon, clouds gathered again, darker this time. The scent of rain returned, richer, deeper. Akinosuke stood beneath the open sky as the first drops began to fall once more. They struck his skin, cool and real. He did not search the sound for hidden meaning. He did not wait for glowing paths or distant voices. He simply stood there, letting the rain soak his clothes, his hair, his thoughts. For the first time, he felt fully present in a moment that did not promise transformation, and that, he realized, was its gift. As the rain grew heavier, Akinosuke laughed softly to himself, not from joy alone, but from recognition. Life had not changed its nature. It remained uncertain, unfinished, demanding. What had changed was his willingness to stand within it without retreating into longing. When he returned indoors, dripping and cold, he lit the lamp once more. Its flame flickered, steady despite the moisture in the air. He watched it for a long while, then spoke quietly, not to the room, not to the rain, but to himself. "I will walk forward awake." Outside, water continued to fall, not as a lullaby this time, but as a reminder. The night would return again and again. So would rest, so would dreams. But now, Akinosuke understood the difference between sleeping to escape life and resting, so he could meet it fully when morning came. Morning arrived with a muted glow, the world washed in soft silver tones, as if the sky itself were still whispering from the night's rain. Akinosuke stepped outside, feet pressing into the damp earth, and felt the lingering coolness under his soles. Each breath drew in the faint scent of wet soil and growing grass, a reminder that the world moved forward even when the heart paused. The village was stirring again, slowly, deliberately. People moved with quiet purpose, not rushing, but carrying out routines that now seemed richer, layered with small details he had not noticed before. The way children traced their fingers along the edges of wooden doors, the careful balance of baskets filled with produce, the low hum of labor that had become a song over the years. He watched it all silently, letting the patterns of life sink into him. Akinosuke wandered to the nearby stream, its water rising faintly from overnight showers. The reflection of the sky shifted with the movement of the current, a mosaic of light and shadow. He knelt beside it and dipped his hands into the cool flow. The sensation grounded him, but it also carried an echo of the dream, the settlement he had guided, the choices he had made, the lessons he had been given. Everything felt both distant and immediate at once. A faint sound reached him then, carried on the wind, a soft tapping that was neither rain nor footsteps. He looked up to see a child from the village running along the bank, her small feet splashing water lightly. She stopped, holding a cluster of smooth stones, her eyes wide and curious. "Will you help me?" she asked. Akinosuke smiled gently, taking the stones from her small hands. "Of course," he said. Together, they arranged them along the edge of the stream, creating a pattern that reflected light in a playful dance. The child laughed, a pure, unself-conscious sound, and ran off when the task was complete, leaving him with a quiet satisfaction he had not felt in years. He continued along the path, noticing the subtle rhythms of life around him. Farmers bent over soil, tending seedlings that would one day feed families. Women carried water from the channel, balancing it with careful skill. Elderly men rested under trees, sharing stories too quiet to hear from afar. Every movement, every sound, seemed to carry weight, purpose, and intention. Hours passed in this quiet observation until Akinosuke arrived at the hill overlooking the village. From this vantage, he saw the fields stretching outward, the rooftops clustered neatly, the smoke of cooking fires rising in thin streams. He realized that, though he had guided the settlement in the dream, here, in reality, it had endured without his interference. It was alive, not because he had been present, but because it was sustained by countless small acts of care, choice, and resilience. He felt a mix of relief and awe. The dream had shown him power, responsibility, and connection. This waking world reminded him of patience, endurance, and quiet courage. Both were real, both mattered, and neither could exist without the other. As afternoon arrived, clouds thickened in the sky, carrying the promise of another gentle shower. Akinosuke returned to the village slowly, passing through gardens and narrow lanes. He stopped to speak with neighbors, helping to repair a fence here, lifting a fallen branch there. Each task, small and simple, now felt imbued with significance. By evening, rain began to fall again, not heavy, not urgent, but consistent. He watched from the doorway of his home as the drops traced the contours of the earth, gathering in tiny streams and puddles. The sound was soothing, familiar, but no longer a signal of escape. It was part of life, part of reality, part of the rhythm he now understood. Akinosuke lit the oil lamp once more and sat beside it. The flame flickered softly, and he allowed himself a long, steady exhale. The dream, the lessons, the reflections, all were inside him now. He no longer needed to chase visions or rely on distant guidance. He spoke quietly, not to anyone, not to the rain, but to himself. Presence matters more than perfection. Awareness matters more than control. And living fully, even in small moments, is the truest journey of all. The rain continued its gentle song, and for the first time in a long while, Akinosuke felt a profound stillness. not empty, not lonely, but complete in its own unfolding. He closed his eyes, ready to rest, ready to meet another day, knowing that the rhythm of life, like the falling water, would continue whether he watched or not. The day began softly, with a sky painted in muted hues of pink and gray, as if the morning itself were stretching carefully after a long night. Akinosuke stepped outside, feeling the faint chill on his skin and the dampness under his feet. Each breath carried the earthy scent of the wet soil, mingled with the delicate fragrance of the flowers that had bloomed overnight. It was a quiet morning, yet it held a depth that stirred something inside him, a sense that life continued in subtle motions even when he was unaware. He wandered along the winding path that led beyond the village, past familiar homes and gardens. The inhabitants moved with gentle purpose, carrying water, tending crops, sweeping floors. But now he observed the rhythms differently. Every movement, every glance, every murmur of conversation seemed layered with intention. The villagers were not merely existing. They were shaping the world around them through quiet, deliberate care. Akinosuke stopped near a wooden bridge crossing a narrow stream. He watched the water flow over smooth stones, each ripple catching the soft morning light. The sound of moving water reminded him of the dream, of the glowing city, and the lanterns suspended in the air. That memory no longer held him. Instead, it illuminated the contrast between illusion and reality. Here, the water was simple, ordinary, yet it carried the weight of life itself. He knelt by the stream and let his fingers touch the surface. The coldness was grounding, real. He traced small patterns with his hands, watching as the ripples spread and faded. A young boy approached, holding a small wooden toy boat. "Will you show me how to make it float better?" the child asked. Akinosuke smiled. "Of course," he said. Together they adjusted the boat's balance, learning to watch the water, feel its currents, and anticipate its movement. The boy's laughter rang through the air as the boat finally glided smoothly, carried by the flow. In that moment, Akinosuke felt a quiet fulfillment, different from the thrill of authority or guidance. It was simple, unassuming, yet deeply sustaining. As he continued along the path, he noticed subtle changes in the landscape. Flowers leaned toward the sun, leaves glistened with moisture, and the air vibrated faintly with the life of the land. He realized that growth did not always announce itself with grandeur. Often it came in the smallest of adjustments, unnoticed unless one paid close attention. By midday, villagers had gathered near the central square to prepare for the planting of new crops. Akinosuke offered to help, not as a leader, but as a participant. He carried water, arranged seeds, and dug small trenches with steady hands. Around him, laughter, conversation, and gentle guidance flowed naturally. No one looked to him for instruction, yet his presence was felt, not as authority, but as shared effort. During a brief pause, he rested against the trunk of an old tree and looked toward the hills in the distance. The horizon stretched endlessly, marked by the faint outlines of distant forests and winding streams. He reflected on how far he had come since the dream, how much he had learned about responsibility, attachment, and the difference between being present and controlling. Evening arrived slowly. The clouds thickened, carrying the promise of rain. Akinosuke returned to his home where the familiar smell of damp wood and earth greeted him. He lit the lamp, its flame flickering gently, casting soft shadows on the walls. The sound of rain soon followed, tapping against the roof in a steady rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. He sat quietly, listening to the drops, feeling each one as a connection between the sky and the earth. The rain no longer summoned visions or illusions. It no longer carried expectation. It simply existed, and through that existence, it reminded him of the flow of life. Continuous, unpredictable, yet perfectly balanced. Akinosuke whispered softly to himself, "True understanding does not come from seeing the extraordinary, but from fully living the ordinary." To be awake is to notice, to participate, and to embrace what is present. The night deepened, and the rain continued its gentle song. Akinosuke felt a steady calm within, a quiet certainty that life's lessons were not found in distant dreams or imagined realms, but in the subtle, unbroken moments of awareness, care, and presence. And as he closed his eyes to rest, he carried with him a profound sense of connection, not to power, not to influence, but to the living, breathing rhythm of the world around him. Dawn arrived slowly, casting a soft, muted glow across the village. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and the faint rustle of leaves sounded like whispered conversations. Akinosuke stepped outside, feeling the moisture soak the soles of his sandals and cool the skin of his feet. The morning seemed different today, not in brightness or warmth, but in subtle energy. Every movement of the world felt deliberate, as though nature itself was stretching after a long slumber. He wandered along the narrow lanes of the settlement, observing the villagers at work. A group of women carried baskets of freshly harvested vegetables, carefully balancing them as they moved from one home to another. Children ran along the edges of the path, their laughter ringing clear in the damp air. An old man tended a small garden, hands moving with practiced care over the soil. Each action seemed ordinary, yet now, to Akinosuke, it carried the weight of purpose and patience. He reached the river that flowed along the village's edge. The water was higher than usual, fed by recent rains, and it moved with a gentle, persistent current. He knelt beside it, letting his hands skim the surface. The cold water rippled under his touch, sending faint waves outward. In the reflections, he saw not just the sky above, but a subtle impression of the world beyond the village. The memories of the dream, the glowing city, the suspended lanterns, all blending softly with the present. A voice called out behind him. A young woman approached, holding a bundle of herbs. The rain brought them early this year, she said, offering the fragrant green stems. Will you help me prepare them for drying? Akinosuke nodded, and together they spread the herbs on mats in the sunlight that had begun to break through the clouds. As they worked, the rhythm of motion, conversation, and shared effort wove a quiet harmony. The simplicity of the task, the absence of expectation, and the sense of contribution filled him with a warmth he had not anticipated. After the work was done, he continued walking toward the hill that overlooked the village. From this vantage, the world seemed to stretch endlessly, the fields, houses, and paths merging into patterns that were both complex and serene. He reflected on the lessons he had learned, the fragile balance of guidance, the weight of responsibility, the necessity of stepping back to allow growth. A faint movement at the edge of his vision drew him to a narrow path leading into the woods. Curiosity guided him forward. The forest was dense, alive with the sounds of dripping water, rustling leaves, and the occasional bird call. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in streaks, illuminating patches of moss and fallen branches. Each step deepened his awareness, and with each breath, he felt a connection to something larger than the village, larger than even the dreams he had walked through. They stopped by a small clearing where a pool of water had collected. The surface reflected the sky and the surrounding trees, broken only by occasional raindrops falling from the leaves above. Kneeling, he traced circles in the water with his fingers, watching the ripples expand and fade. The simple act reminded him that every motion, no matter how small, could create change. As evening approached, the sky darkened with heavy clouds. A gentle rain began to fall, tapping rhythmically on the leaves and roof tiles. Akinosuke returned to the village, feeling the cool droplets soak his hair and clothes. The familiar sounds of daily life persisted around him. The closing of doors, the soft laughter of children, the distant murmur of voices. But now, each sound felt layered with meaning, as if life itself was singing a quiet song. He lit the lamp inside his home. The flame, flickering softly against the walls. Sitting beside it, he reflected on the day, on the small lessons that had unfolded, on the understanding that fulfillment was not the accumulation of achievements, but the conscious participation in life's quiet moment. The rain continued through the night, steady and unrelenting. Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of the drops carry him into rest. And as he drifted toward sleep, he understood something profound, that the measure of life was not in grand gestures or distant dreams, but in attention, presence, and the care with which each ordinary act was performed. And that he had finally begun to awaken fully. The morning unfolded quietly, with a soft haze lingering over the village, like a delicate veil that softened the edges of the familiar world. Akinosuke stepped onto the damp ground, feeling the moisture cling to his feet, and inhaled deeply. The air was cool, carrying the faint fragrance of wet grass and the subtle tang of stone and wood that had absorbed the night's rainfall. Each breath seemed to draw him more fully into the present, anchoring him to the rhythm of life around him. He wandered along the winding paths that meandered through the settlement. Villagers moved about their tasks with gentle determination, repairing fences, tending animals, gathering fresh produce. The actions were ordinary, almost unnoticed by those immersed in them. But Akinosuke now saw the care embedded in each movement. The precision of a basket balanced, the patience of a child learning to carry water, the quiet deliberation of elders pruning plant. All of it spoke of an unspoken harmony that he had once overlooked. He stopped by the central well, its stone edges worn smooth from years of use. The water mirrored the pale sky above, broken only by the occasional ripple of a dropped leaf or falling raindrop. He cupped his hands and let the cool liquid flow through his fingers, feeling the subtle pull of the current. It was grounding, a reminder of the continuity of life, the small, persistent currents that shaped existence even without recognition. A villager approached, an elderly man carrying a small bundle of freshly cut herbs. "Will you help me tie these?" he asked, voice steady and kind. Akinosuke nodded. Together they worked, carefully bundling the fragrant leaves, listening to the faint whispers of wind through the nearby trees. The task required patience and focus, and in those shared moments, Akinosuke felt a quiet satisfaction, not from accomplishment, but from connection. The man spoke occasionally, sharing memories of past seasons, lessons learned, and subtle wisdom hidden in ordinary life. Akinosuke absorbed each word, sensing the depth and simplicity. Afterwards, he wandered toward the fields on the outskirts of the settlement. The soil was dark and fertile, dotted with young shoots reaching toward the light. He watched farmers tending the rows, their hands moving with practiced care. Each furrow, each seed, each careful adjustment was a dialogue with the earth. The rain-soaked air carried their labors forward, mixing with the scent of growth and renewal. Akinosuke knelt in the soil, feeling its texture and moisture. He pressed his palms lightly against the ground, imagining the countless small choices that had led to this moment: water measured, seeds planted, weeds removed, care given. Life, he realized, was built on countless unseen acts, each one shaping the whole in subtle but undeniable ways. As afternoon approached, clouds thickened overhead, signaling another rain. Akinosuke climbed a gentle slope to overlook the village. From this vantage, he saw the rooftops, the winding paths, and the scattered gardens, all connected in a quiet network of activity. There was no need for grandeur here. The beauty lay in the ordinary, in the small interwoven actions that sustained life. When the rain arrived, it came as a gentle curtain, drumming softly on the roofs and soaking the earth. Akinosuke stood beneath it, letting the droplets fall freely over him. They were neither a signal nor a summons, but a presence, a reminder of the continuity and persistence of the world. He felt a steady calm, a sense of being part of something larger without needing to dominate or direct it. Returning to his home, he lit the lamp, its flame flickering in harmony with the shadows cast by the rain-soaked evening. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the day, the attention required in ordinary tasks, the subtle interconnections between people, the resilience and patience embedded in every action. He whispered softly to himself, "Life is sustained not by grand gestures, but by care, presence, and quiet commitment. To be awake is to notice, to participate, and to honor the ordinary." Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm. Akinosuke closed his eyes, allowing the sound and scent to guide him into rest, carrying with him a growing awareness that true wisdom and fulfillment are not found in extraordinary experiences, but in living fully and attentively in each unassuming moment that life presents. A soft light crept across the village as dawn unfolded, casting a gentle glow over the streets, the gardens, and the low wooden homes. Akinosuke stepped outside, feeling the earth damp beneath his feet and inhaling the mingling scents of wet grass, freshly turned soil, and the lingering fragrance of blossoms stirred by the night. The air carried a faint chill, a reminder that change comes slowly but steadily, leaving traces that can be felt if one is attentive. He wandered along the narrow paths between homes, observing the villagers as they moved about their early tasks. A woman carried a small bundle of linen to hang in the sun, her movements deliberate yet fluid. Children played quietly near the edge of the fields, their laughter mingling with the soft call of birds. An old man swept the steps in front of his house, rhythmically brushing dust and leaves aside. Each action was modest, unremarkable on its own, yet together, they formed a tapestry of effort and care. Akinosuke paused, noticing the subtle coordination that had arisen naturally over time. A silent rhythm that connected each person to the next, weaving community from everyday gestures. He continued toward the river, following its gentle curves as it traced the settlement's edge. The water ran clear and steady, reflecting the sky above in muted blues and grays. He knelt to touch it, letting the cool flow run through his hands. In the ripples, he saw faint reflections of past dreams, not sharply defined, but softened by distance. The dream had given him guidance and perspective, but the river reminded him that reality carried its own wisdom, quietly unfolding in the present. Nearby, a young man approached, carrying a small bundle of tools for repairing a fence. "Will you help me?" he asked. Akinosuke smiled, "Of course," he said, and together they worked along the fence line. They dug, lifted, and aligned the wooden posts, measuring space with careful hands and mutual attention. They spoke little, communicating more through shared effort than words. As the work progressed, Akinosuke felt a deep satisfaction, not from achievement or recognition, but from the act of participating, from being present in a tangible way. When the task was complete, he walked toward the fields stretching beyond the village. The soil was dark, rich with moisture from recent rains, and young shoots were emerging steadily. Farmers bent over the rows, hands moving with precision and care. Akinosuke knelt among the plants, feeling the earth's texture and resilience. The subtle patterns of growth, the interplay of water, sun, and soil, reminded him that life thrived not through spectacle, but through persistence and attention to detail. Every choice, every careful movement, contributed to something larger, often unseen. By midday, clouds gathered once again, hinting at rain. Akinosuke climbed a gentle hill to observe the village below. The rooftops glistened with dew, the gardens shimmered, and the villagers moved through their routines with quiet purpose. From this vantage, he recognized the delicate balance that held the settlement together, not a result of one person's guidance, but of countless small actions harmonized over time. When the rain finally arrived, it fell as a steady, gentle curtain, soaking the earth and washing the leaves clean. Akinosuke stood beneath it, feeling the cool drops on his skin. There was no urgency in the rain, no demand. It existed simply as it was, reminding him of continuity, resilience, and the unspoken order of life. He returned to his home, where the familiar scent of wet wood and earth welcomed him. Lighting the lamp, he sat quietly, reflecting on the day. He thought of the careful acts of labor, the laughter of children, the resilience of the land, and the steady flow of life. Each moment, he realized, contained its own wisdom, waiting to be observed and embraced. He spoke softly to himself. Awareness is the truest form of presence. Life's strength lies not in grand gestures, but in careful attention, in participation, and in respect for the ordinary. The rain continued its rhythmic song through the night. Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting it guide him into rest. For the first time in many days, he felt a profound sense of harmony, not from control, not from influence, but from fully inhabiting the space between the ordinary and the extraordinary, the seen and the unseen, the quiet labor and the gentle persistence that sustained all life. Morning arrived with a muted glow, soft and hazy, as if the sky itself had been brushed lightly with pastels. Akinosuke stepped outside, feeling the earth cool and slightly slick beneath his feet. The air carried the subtle scent of damp moss, freshly turned soil, and the faint perfume of flowers stirred awake by the lingering mist. Each inhalation seemed to ground him more fully in the present, a reminder that life moved quietly, even when it appeared still. He strolled through the winding lanes of the settlement, observing the rhythm of daily life. Villagers engaged in tasks that required patience and attentiveness. A young woman gathered wild herbs from a low-lying patch, arranging them neatly in a woven basket. An elderly man repaired the roof of his small home, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Children ran across open courtyards, their laughter breaking the hush but settling quickly into the gentle murmur of activity. Each motion was simple, yet Akinosuke noticed the underlying care and intention in every act. What once might have seemed mundane now revealed a network of life and interdependence that was quietly profound. He made his way to the edge of the village, where a narrow stream traced a silver ribbon through the landscape. Kneeling beside it, he let his fingers skim the surface. The water flowed steadily, forming miniature waves that caught the early light. Akinosuke watched them for several minutes, noting how even the smallest disturbance altered the pattern briefly, only for it to return to calm. Life, he realized, operated much the same way. Each action rippled outward, affecting unseen corners, yet eventually finding balance again. A villager approached him, carrying a bundle of freshly harvested vegetables. "Would you help me carry these to the market?" she asked. He nodded, and together they moved carefully along the narrow paths, balancing the baskets, stepping around puddles, and exchanging quiet conversation. The task required cooperation, attentiveness, and patience. But it was precisely these qualities that allowed a sense of connection to emerge between them. Akinosuke felt a calm satisfaction, not derived from the work itself, but from the shared effort and mutual reliance. Later, he wandered toward the small orchards on the outskirts of the settlement. Trees bent under the weight of ripening fruit, their branches glistening with moisture. He reached up to touch the leaves and fruit, feeling the subtle vibration of life within them. Each tree, each branch, each leaf had grown through care and time, and Akinosuke understood that nurturing, even in its smallest forms, carried profound significance. As the afternoon deepened, clouds gathered, signaling another gentle rain. Akinosuke climbed a small rise overlooking the village. From this vantage point, he could see the interconnectedness of the settlement, the houses, gardens, and pathways forming a living mosaic. The patterns of movement, effort, and care were clear now, a reminder that harmony was rarely the result of one person, but rather of countless small contributions woven together over time. When the rain began, it fell steadily, drumming softly on the leaves, rooftops, and pathways. Akinosuke stepped into it, feeling the droplets soak his clothing and hair. They were neither urgent nor demanding, only present. The sensation reminded him of patience, continuity, and the quiet strength that resided in persistence. He did not seek escape in the rain. Instead, he welcomed it as a companion, a gentle teacher. Returning to his home, he lit the lamp, its flame flickering softly against the walls. Sitting beside it, he reflected on the day. The attention evident in every small act, the patterns of care sustaining the village, the resilience embedded in both people and land. He whispered to himself, "The depth of life is revealed not in grand accomplishments, but in attentiveness, in steady effort, and in quiet participation." The rain continued through the night, rhythmic and calming. Akinosuke closed his eyes, feeling the gentle pulse of the world around him. For the first time, he realized that harmony did not need spectacle to exist. It required only awareness, presence, and a willingness to engage fully in the ordinary miracles unfolding around him. The day broke with a soft, silvery light that filtered through the morning mist, painting the village in gentle shades of gray and pale green. Akinosuke stepped onto the dewy ground, feeling the cool dampness cling to his feet and the subtle unevenness of the earth beneath him. Each breath carried the faint aroma of wet leaves, fertile soil, and the delicate perfume of early blossoms. The morning air was still, yet vibrant in its own quiet way, whispering of life continuing in patient, unseen rhythms. He walked through the winding lanes, noticing the small but deliberate motions of the villagers. A young man carried bundles of firewood carefully stacked on his shoulder, moving steadily without haste. Women prepared the morning meals with focused attention, chopping vegetables, washing grains, and stirring pots with care. Children ran between houses, their laughter punctuating the soft sounds of the day, while the elderly tended their gardens with precise movements learned over years. Each gesture, no matter how ordinary, conveyed purpose, and Akinosuke recognized the beauty in this coordinated flow, a harmony born of consistency and quiet mindfulness rather than spectacle. He moved toward the small creek that curved along the village's edge. Kneeling, he cupped the flowing water in his hands, letting it cascade gently back into the current. The liquid mirrored the sky above, broken into shifting patterns by small ripples. Akinosuke observed how the water adapted to stones, bends, and fallen branches, yielding to obstacles while maintaining its direction. The subtle persistence of the stream reminded him of life's own quiet endurance, how continuity and patience often shaped existence more than force or control. A villager approached, carrying a bundle of freshly harvested herbs. "Would you help me tie these?" she asked, offering the green stems. Akinosuke smiled and nodded. Together, they laid the herbs on a simple mat, weaving them into neat bundles. The act required attention and a gentle coordination, yet no words were necessary beyond brief instruction. In these moments, Akinosuke felt a sense of connection that was deeper than any recognition or praise. Bond created simply through shared presence and deliberate action. Afterwards, he wandered toward the orchard, where fruit trees bent under the weight of ripening produce. Droplets of rain still clung to the leaves, shimmering faintly in the soft light. He ran his fingers along the rough bark and smooth fruit, sensing the subtle vitality within each tree. The growth, he realized, was the result of consistent care and patience, not sudden effort or grand gestures. Every branch, leaf, and fruit existed because of repeated attention over time. A lesson in perseverance and mindfulness he felt deeply within himself. As midday approached, the sky began to thicken with clouds, promising another gentle rain. Akinosuke climbed a small rise to overlook the village. From this height, he could see the network of houses, gardens, and pathways stretching in a delicate web of activity. Movement, labor, and care intertwined seamlessly, forming a living tapestry of collaboration. He understood that the village thrived not because of any single action or person, but because of countless small, thoughtful efforts, each sustained through attention and persistence. When the rain arrived, it fell softly at first, then steadily, drumming a rhythmic pattern on the roofs, leaves, and soil. Akinosuke stepped into it, letting the droplets soak his hair and clothing. The sensation was grounding, a gentle reminder of continuity and the unspoken patterns of life. He did not seek escape in the rain. He embraced it as a guide, a teacher, a companion that moved with him and the world around him. Returning home, he lit the lamp, watching the flame flicker gently. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the morning, the shared efforts, and the invisible threads that connected the village. He whispered softly to himself, "Strength lies not in dominance, nor in grandeur, but in consistency, attentiveness, and presence. True harmony is woven in the ordinary moments we live fully." The rain continued through the night, steady and persistent. Akinosuke closed his eyes, listening to its gentle rhythm, feeling the pulse of the world around him. He understood now that life's depth was not found in extraordinary events, but in fully inhabiting each moment, engaging thoughtfully with the small, unassuming acts that sustain existence. In this understanding, he found a quiet, enduring peace. The morning began with a delicate gray light filtering through the clouds, softening the edges of the village and the surrounding field. Akinosuke stepped onto the damp ground, feeling the cool firmness of the earth beneath his feet and the lingering moisture of the night's drizzle. The air was crisp, carrying the mingled scents of wet grass, moss, and the faint perfume of wildflowers that had blossomed overnight. Each inhalation brought a sense of grounding, a subtle reminder that life continued steadily, in its own quiet rhythm, even when unnoticed. He wandered along the paths that curved between the homes, observing the gentle movements of the villagers. A farmer guided a plow through the soil with steady hands, turning the earth carefully to prepare for the next planting. A mother tended to her children, showing them how to gather fresh water without spilling a drop, her voice soft and patient. Children chased one another along the narrow lanes, their laughter bright and fleeting, while elders mended fences or swept courtyards with precise, measured motions. Each action, though simple, was imbued with care and intention. Akinosuke noticed how seamlessly these small efforts connected, creating a pattern of life that was self-sustaining and resilient. He made his way to the stream that ran through the edge of the settlement, kneeling to touch the flowing water. Its surface was cool and smooth, rippling gently with the movement of current and occasional leaves drifting downstream. Akinosuke watched the water adjust to obstacles, bending around rocks and branches without resistance, and reflected on how existence often mirrored this quiet persistence. Life, he realized, thrived not through force or haste, but through patience, adaptability, and attention to the subtle currents around it. A villager approached, carrying a small bundle of harvested vegetables. "Would you assist me with these?" they asked, offering the produce. Akinosuke smiled and joined in, lifting and balancing the baskets as they made their way toward a common area. The work was simple, but it required focus, care, and an awareness of rhythm and balance. As they moved together, conversation flowed naturally, not out of obligation, but as a means of connection. In this shared effort, Akinosuke felt a calm satisfaction, a sense of harmony that came from participating fully rather than directing or controlling. Later, he wandered toward the orchard, where trees were heavy with fruit. Rain droplets still clung to leaves and branches, sparkling faintly in the muted sunlight. He reached out to touch the bark and smooth surfaces, feeling the subtle pulse of life within each tree. Growth, he realized, was the result of steady nurturing, of repeated, small acts of attention and care. Every branch, every leaf, every fruit existed because of persistence and mindful action, a reflection of the hidden patterns sustaining life. By midday, clouds thickened above, hinting at another soft shower. Akinosuke climbed a gentle hill overlooking the settlement. From this vantage, he could see the intricate web of homes, gardens, and paths, each element connected through quiet effort and attention. Movement, labor, and care interwove seamlessly, forming a network that was resilient, sustainable, and harmonious. It was not the work of any one person, but of countless small, deliberate acts that together created stability and continuity. When the rain began again, it fell gently, steadily drumming on leaves, rooftops, and the soil. Akinosuke stepped into it, letting the droplets soak his hair and clothing. The sensation was grounding, reminding him of the persistent rhythms of life, of continuity, and of the quiet strength that comes from consistent presence. The rain was neither urgent nor demanding. It was simply and fully itself. Returning home, he lit the lamp, its warm glow flickering across the familiar walls. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the morning, the orchard, the stream, and the interconnected acts that sustained the village. He whispered to himself, "True strength arises not from grand gestures, but from consistency, awareness, and participation. Life's harmony exists in the quiet, persistent moments we inhabit fully." As the rain continued through the night, Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting the rhythmic sound guide him into rest. He felt an enduring peace, knowing that life's depth was found not in extraordinary events, but in the mindful engagement with each ordinary, sustaining moment around him. The first light of morning seeped through the lingering fog, casting a soft, muted glow over the village and the surrounding fields. Akinosuke stepped onto the damp path, feeling the slight give of wet soil beneath his feet and the cool caress of mist on his skin. The air carried a mixture of scents: fresh earth, the faint sweetness of budding flowers, and the crispness of leaves still wet from the night. Each breath seemed to anchor him deeper into the present, a reminder that life moved steadily in its own quiet cadence, whether observed or not. He wandered along the twisting lanes, watching villagers begin their day with deliberate care. A young girl gathered eggs from a coop, handling each one gently to avoid cracking. A middle-aged man repaired a section of a fence, his hands precise and steady, working without hurry or complaint. Children chased one another around open courtyards, their laughter echoing softly and blending into the gentle hum of activity. Elders swept the paths and trimmed shrubs, their movements methodical, embodying patience. Akinosuke felt a growing appreciation for the subtle coordination of these daily tasks, recognizing how the smallest actions contributed to the enduring rhythm of communal life. He walked toward the stream that cut across the village edge, kneeling beside it to let his hands dip into the cool, flowing water. The surface glimmered faintly in the morning light, disturbed only by the occasional leaf drifting downstream. He noticed how the current adapted to rocks and fallen branches, adjusting its course without force, maintaining its persistence toward the river beyond. The flow mirrored life itself. Challenges and obstacles appeared, yet continued progress was achieved through flexibility and attention rather than brute effort. Nearby, a villager approached with a basket of herbs and fresh vegetables. "Could you help me carry these to the market?" they asked, offering him the load. Akinosuke accepted with a nod, lifting and balancing the basket as they moved together. The work demanded coordination, attentiveness, and gentle communication. They walked slowly along narrow lanes, stepping around puddles and uneven stones. Each careful motion, each word exchanged, created a subtle sense of harmony. Akinosuke felt a satisfaction deeper than accomplishment. It arose from being fully engaged in the shared effort, aware of the interdependence that bound the villagers and the land together. Later, he wandered toward the orchard on the village outskirts. The trees, heavy with ripening fruit, were dotted with droplets of lingering rain. He reached out to touch leaves and branches, feeling the quiet energy within them. Every tree, every branch, every fruit bore evidence of care and patience, the result of repeated, attentive action over time. Growth was not immediate, but steady, shaped by persistence and mindful observation. Each element, though small, contributed to a larger pattern that sustained the orchard, and by extension, the village itself. As afternoon approached, clouds rolled across the sky, hinting at another gentle shower. Akinosuke climbed a slight rise overlooking the village. From this vantage, the settlement revealed its subtle interconnections. Homes, gardens, paths, and fields forming an intricate network. The movements of labor, care, and daily routines intertwined seamlessly, sustaining life without spectacle or grand design. Harmony, he realized, emerged from countless deliberate and patient actions rather than from a single guiding force. When rain returned, it fell softly, tapping on leaves, rooftops, and soil with a gentle, steady rhythm. Akinosuke stepped into it, letting the cool droplets soak his hair and clothing. He felt no need to escape or seek answers in the falling water. Instead, he welcomed it as a companion, a teacher, and a reminder of the quiet resilience that supported all living things. Returning home, he lit the lamp, its flickering glow warm and reassuring. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the day, the orchard, the stream, and the intricate, persistent efforts of the villagers. He whispered to himself, life's strength lies in patience, attention, and thoughtful participation. Harmony is found in the small, enduring actions that weave the world together. As the rain continued through the night, Akinosuke closed his eyes, allowing its rhythm to guide him into rest. He understood, at last, that the depth of life was not in dramatic moments or sudden insights, but in the consistent, mindful engagement with the ordinary, sustaining patterns around him. The day broke with a gentle haze, softening the horizon and draping the village in a quiet, silver light. Akinosuke stepped out, feeling the damp earth beneath his feet and the faint coolness lingering in the air. Each breath carried the faint scent of wet grass, earth freshly turned, and the subtle aroma of flowers that had slowly opened overnight. The stillness of the morning held a rhythm of its own, a quiet pulse that whispered of life moving forward, unnoticed yet steady. He walked along the narrow winding lanes of the village, taking in the early routines of its inhabitants. A woman carried water from the well, balancing it carefully as she moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace. A man bent over the soil in a small garden, planting seeds with careful hands and measured patience. Children ran freely between the houses, their laughter rising and fading, mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of conversation. Elders tended to small repairs, adjusting fences, trimming plants, or sweeping the courtyard. Each gesture precise, methodical, and quietly purposeful. Akinosuke observed these movements closely, appreciating the subtle interplay of effort and care that gave shape and continuity to village life. He wandered toward the stream that curved around the outskirts of the settlement. Kneeling by the water's edge, he cupped his hands and let the flowing liquid slide through his fingers. The stream shimmered faintly, disturbed only by occasional ripples caused by leaves or small stones. He watched the current adjust naturally around obstacles, bending and flowing without force, maintaining its steady course. It reminded him of life's resilience, how progress is often achieved through gentle persistence and adaptability rather than through pressure or control. As he lingered, a villager approached with a basket of freshly harvested produce. "Would you assist me with these?" they asked, holding it out toward him. Akinosuke nodded and took the weight, balancing it carefully as they walked along the narrow lanes together. The task demanded focus, coordination, and subtle communication. Each step, each adjustment, each shared word created a sense of harmony that transcended the simple act of carrying vegetables. He felt the satisfaction of connection, of shared purpose, and of participation without the need for recognition or authority. Later, he moved toward the orchard, where rows of fruit-laden trees stretched into the distance. The leaves and branches glistened faintly with residual moisture from the night. He reached out to touch them, feeling the slight vibration of life within each branch and the firm weight of fruit. Each tree had grown slowly, shaped by consistent attention, the careful tending of seasons, and patient observation. He understood now that life's endurance relied on subtle, repeated actions more than sudden interventions. Each small effort, though unseen, contributed to a larger whole, sustaining the orchard, the village, and the natural balance that held everything together. By midday, clouds gathered, signaling another shower. Akinosuke climbed a gentle slope overlooking the village. From this vantage, the network of homes, gardens, paths, and fields formed an interconnected mosaic. Every action, every movement of labor or care, contributed to the harmony he observed. It was not the work of one person, nor the result of a single moment, but of countless small, attentive efforts repeated day after day. When rain began again, it fell as a soft, steady curtain, drumming lightly on rooftops, leaves, and soil. Akinosuke stepped into it, feeling the droplets soak his hair and clothing. The water was neither urgent nor demanding. It existed simply, and by accepting it, he felt grounded, aware of life's quiet strength and continuity. Returning to his home, he lit the lamp, watching its warm light flicker across familiar walls. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the morning and afternoon, the orchard, the stream, and the careful, persistent efforts that sustained the village. He whispered to himself, "True resilience arises not from grand deeds, but from patience, care, and mindful engagement. Harmony is built in the small, persistent acts that support life quietly." As night fell and the rain continued, Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting its rhythm guide him into rest. He understood that the essence of life was not found in dramatic or extraordinary moments, but in the consistent, attentive, and unassuming participation in the ongoing flow of the world around him. The morning emerged softly, with a silver light diffusing through the lingering mist that hugged the village. Akinosuke stepped out onto the moist earth, feeling the subtle coolness beneath his feet and inhaling the fragrance of damp moss, fertile soil, and newly awakened blooms. Each inhalation carried a quiet clarity, a gentle reminder that life moved onward in its own subtle rhythm, unhurried and persistent, even when unnoticed. He wandered along the twisting pathways that led between the clustered homes. Villagers were beginning their daily routines with care and attention. A young woman carried bundles of herbs, arranging them neatly while moving slowly so as not to disturb their delicate fragrance. A man swept the steps of his home, methodically brushing away leaves and dust with measured strokes. Children dashed across open spaces, their laughter a fleeting, bright spark amidst the gentle hum of labor. Elderly villagers adjusted garden beds, repaired tools, and carefully guided younger hands in simple tasks. Each act, though ordinary, seemed to ripple quietly, creating cohesion and resilience within the village's daily rhythm. Akinosuke paused, watching these layers of movement and interaction, and realized that strength often lay in small, persistent contributions rather than sudden gestures. He continued toward the brook that wound around the settlement's edge. Kneeling beside it, he let his hands brush through the flowing water. The surface reflected the muted sky, disturbed only by ripples from passing leaves and the gentle push of the current. The stream curved and adapted around obstacles naturally, flowing onward without resistance. Its behavior reminded Akinosuke of life's subtle persistence. Progress was often the product of patience, adaptability, and attentiveness rather than force or haste. A villager carrying a basket of freshly picked fruits approached him. "Could you help me bring these to the central square?" they asked. Akinosuke smiled and took up the basket. They moved together through the narrow lanes, stepping carefully to avoid puddles and uneven stones. The shared task required coordination, subtle communication, and mindful awareness. It was not an act of grandeur, but it created a quiet sense of connection, a harmony born from the mutual effort and attention given to something as simple as carrying produce. Akinosuke felt satisfaction that was deeper than recognition, a sense of being woven into the life of the community through small, meaningful contributions. Later, he wandered to the orchard that lay beyond the village. The trees were laden with fruit, their leaves glistening with residual moisture from overnight dew. Akinosuke touched the branches gently, feeling the subtle vitality within each one. Growth, he realized, required steady care, persistence, and the quiet patience of repeated effort. Each branch, each leaf, each piece of fruit was evidence that life was sustained not by sudden bursts of activity, but by ongoing, deliberate attention. The orchard stood as a silent testament to endurance, tending, and the invisible labor that upheld its vitality. As afternoon approached, the sky darkened, heavy clouds gathering with the promise of rain. Akinosuke climbed a small rise overlooking the village. From this vantage, the delicate network of homes, gardens, and paths revealed itself as a cohesive, living system. The steady movements of people, animals, and nature combined seamlessly, demonstrating that harmony was achieved not through force or oversight, but through countless small, intentional actions repeated over time. When rain began, it fell in gentle sheets, drumming lightly against rooftops, leaves, and the earth. Akinosuke let it soak his hair and clothing, welcoming the cool, steady presence. The droplets were a reminder of the persistence and quiet strength inherent in life's rhythms, a guide in understanding how patience and consistent attention shape the world. Returning home, he lit the lamp and sat quietly, reflecting on the streams, the orchard, and the interconnected lives of the villagers. He whispered softly, "Resilience is found not in grand gestures, but in awareness, care, and persistent, mindful participation. Harmony grows in small, steady actions repeated with attention and devotion." The rain continued through the night, soft and unrelenting. Akinosuke closed his eyes, allowing the cadence of the falling water to carry him into rest. In that steady rhythm, he recognized that life's depth was woven not in extraordinary moments, but in consistent, patient engagement with the ordinary threads that sustain existence. The morning opened with a gentle, pearly light that seeped through the mist, lingering over the village, giving everything a soft, ethereal glow. Akinosuke stepped onto the wet soil, feeling the subtle coolness beneath his feet and the faint stickiness from overnight dew. The air carried the combined scent of damp earth, moss, and the faint sweetness of blossoms beginning to stir awake. Each inhalation filled him with a calm clarity, a reminder that the flow of life continued steadily, in rhythms unnoticed yet persistent. He strolled along the narrow, winding lanes, observing the unfolding routines of the villagers. A young man carefully guided a plow across a small patch of farmland, measuring each furrow with practiced patience. Women moved with calm deliberation, preparing meals, carrying baskets of herbs, or tending to small gardens. Children played in open spaces, their laughter bright and fleeting, weaving seamlessly with the murmur of conversation and the gentle hum of daily work. Elders adjusted fences, trimmed plants, and guided younger hands with quiet authority. Each act was small and ordinary, yet together they formed a resilient, interdependent network, sustaining the rhythm of life. Akinosuke paused, reflecting on how strength and continuity often arose from repetition, attentiveness, and care, rather than sudden achievement. He continued toward the stream that edged the village, kneeling by the water to let his fingers brush its flowing surface. The ripples shimmered in muted shades, disturbed occasionally by a leaf or small stone carried downstream. He noticed how the water adapted to rocks and curves effortlessly, bending around obstacles yet continuing steadily on its course. It reminded him of the subtle persistence required in life, to adjust, to endure, and to maintain direction without forcing change. A villager approached, carrying a small basket of fresh vegetables. "Would you help me bring these to the communal storehouse?" they asked. Akinosuke accepted with a nod. They moved together, stepping lightly to avoid puddles, coordinating their pace with quiet attentiveness. Each action required awareness, balance, and gentle communication. Though seemingly simple, the shared effort created a bond of purpose and connection, a harmony arising from presence and participation rather than command. Akinosuke felt the satisfaction of contributing meaningfully to the life of the village without seeking recognition or control. Later, he wandered toward the orchard at the settlement's edge. The fruit trees stood heavy with ripening produce, leaves glistening faintly with the lingering moisture of the morning. He reached out to touch them, sensing the subtle energy within each branch. The growth of each tree, every leaf, every fruit was a testament to sustained attention, steady care, and patience over time. It reminded him that life's endurance depended on small, repeated actions, and that the ordinary moments of consistent effort held profound significance. By midday, thick clouds rolled across the sky, signaling the approach of rain. Akinosuke climbed a gentle rise to observe the village from above. From this perspective, the homes, gardens, and pathways intertwined like threads in a living tapestry. The coordinated rhythm of movement, labor, and care was visible, not as a product of one person or force, but through the repetition of countless small, deliberate acts. Harmony, he realized, emerged from these subtle patterns of attention and persistence, rather than from spectacle or authority. When the rain arrived, it fell steadily, drumming on rooftops, leaves, and earth. Akinosuke stood beneath it, letting the droplets soak his hair and clothing. The water was neither urgent nor demanding. It existed in steady consistency. The sensation reminded him of life's quiet strength and the resilience found in consistent presence, patience, and attentiveness. Returning home, he lit the lamp, its warm glow flickering against familiar wall. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the orchard, the stream, and the subtle interconnections of daily life. He whispered softly, "True stability and harmony arise not from grand gestures, but from repeated, mindful effort, from attentiveness and care in each ordinary act." As night deepened and the rain continued, Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting the soft, rhythmic sound guide him into rest. He understood that the essence of life's depth lay not in extraordinary events, but in consistent engagement with the small, sustaining acts that gave life its quiet, enduring meaning. A soft, muted light filtered through the morning mist, draping the village in shades of silver and pale green. Akinosuke stepped onto the dewy ground, feeling the subtle chill beneath his feet and the faint texture of soil softened by overnight moisture. The air was thick with the scent of wet foliage, freshly turned earth, and the delicate perfume of blossoms that had slowly unfurled. Each breath he drew seemed to root him more deeply in the present, revealing the quiet flow of life that continued steadily, even when unnoticed. He wandered along the narrow, winding streets, observing the subtle choreography of the villagers' early routines. A young boy carried a basket of firewood, stepping carefully so as not to drop it. A woman tended to a small garden, moving deliberately to water and prune the plants with attention and care. Children darted between homes, their laughter fleeting yet vivid, blending into the gentle hum of domestic life. Elders repaired fences, trimmed hedges, or guided younger villagers in small tasks, their gestures precise and deliberate. Every motion, though ordinary, contributed to a larger, unseen pattern. sustaining the rhythm of life in ways that were quietly essential. Akinosuke felt the pull of understanding. Continuity and harmony were built not through dramatic action, but through repeated, attentive engagement with the present. He approached the narrow brook that threaded along the village's edge. Kneeling by its side, he let his hands skim the flowing water. The surface reflected a dim, clouded sky, broken intermittently by the ripple of a drifting leaf. The current curved naturally around stones and fallen branches, flowing steadily onward. Observing this, Akinosuke thought about how life, too, moved in response to obstacles. The path may bend, the pace may adjust, but forward motion persisted through quiet, patient adaptability. A villager appeared, holding a basket of freshly harvested vegetables. "Could you help me bring these to the central granary?" they asked, extending the load toward him. Akinosuke accepted the basket, lifting it carefully. They walked side by side along the narrow paths, negotiating puddles and uneven stones. The simple act demanded concentration, coordination, and shared attentiveness. Yet in this simplicity, Akinosuke sensed a profound connection. Harmony arose not from command, but from participation, from aligning one's presence with the needs of another and with the environment around them. A quiet sense of satisfaction settled over him, a feeling that contribution and awareness were far richer than recognition or control. Later, he wandered toward the orchard on the village outskirts. The trees were heavy with fruit, their leaves still clinging to droplets of dew. Akinosuke ran his fingers along the branches, feeling the pulse of life within. He considered the patient care each tree required over time. Pruning, watering, tending. Growth was rarely immediate. It demanded repeated, deliberate attention. Yet each small effort contributed to a larger, enduring result. The orchard's resilience, the nourishment of the village, and the subtle balance of nature itself. As the afternoon approached, thick clouds gathered above, hinting at another shower. Akinosuke climbed a gentle rise to observe the settlement. From this vantage, the interconnected homes, gardens, and pathways appeared as a cohesive, living system. Each gesture of labor, each measured motion, reinforced the network of care that held the village together. Harmony was not produced by a single action or decision, but by countless patient, intentional acts repeated over time. When the rain arrived, it fell steadily, drumming lightly on rooftops, leaves, and soil. Akinosuke welcomed the droplets, letting them soak his hair and clothing. The rain's persistence reminded him of the power in consistency, the resilience found in patience, and the quiet strength embedded in living attentively. Returning home, he lit the lamp and sat in the soft glow. Reflecting on the orchard, the brook, and the coordinated rhythms of the villagers' lives, he whispered to himself, "The essence of endurance lies not in grand gestures, but in repeated care, mindful action, and presence. True harmony is nurtured in the ordinary, patiently sustained moments of life." As night fell and the rain continued, Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting its soft cadence lull him into rest. In that steady rhythm, he recognized that life's depth was not revealed through extraordinary moments, but through continuous, mindful participation in the subtle, sustaining currents of the world around him. The morning unfolded quietly, with a soft, silvery haze settling over the village and the surrounding fields. Akinosuke stepped onto the moist earth, feeling the coolness seep into his feet and the faint unevenness of soil softened by recent rain. The air carried the subtle mixture of damp moss, fertile soil, and the delicate scent of blossoms that had opened overnight. Each breath seemed to center him, making him aware of the slow, persistent rhythm of life that moved forward whether it was noticed or not. He wandered along the winding paths, observing the early movements of the villagers. A woman carried a small bundle of herbs, arranging each carefully, so that none were damaged. A man tended to his garden, measuring each step and touch with attention and patience. Children dashed along open courtyards, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant clatter of domestic chores. Elders repaired tools, swept pathways, or guided younger villagers with deliberate instruction, their actions precise and considered. Each small motion, seemingly insignificant on its own, contributed to a larger, invisible harmony, sustaining the village through patient, attentive effort. Akinosuke marveled at how strength and continuity were built through these repeated acts of care, rather than through sudden or forceful gestures. He moved toward the gentle stream that curved around the village, kneeling to touch the water. Its surface shimmered with muted reflections of the clouded sky, broken occasionally by drifting leaves or small ripples. He observed how the current adapted to rocks, fallen branches, and bends, flowing onward with steady persistence. The water reminded him that life often required subtle flexibility. Progress continued not through brute force, but through attention, patience, and graceful adaptation to circumstance. Nearby, a villager approached, carrying a basket filled with fresh vegetables. "Would you help me carry these to the communal store?" they asked. Akinosuke nodded, lifting the weight carefully. They moved together along the narrow lanes, stepping lightly around puddles and uneven stones, communicating quietly with subtle gestures and brief words. The simplicity of the task belied its deeper significance. Each shared movement cultivated connection and harmony, revealing that meaningful participation arose from attentiveness and cooperation, rather than authority or recognition. Akinosuke felt a quiet satisfaction, sensing the invisible thread that linked his actions with those of the villagers and the life of the settlement itself. Later, he wandered toward the orchard that bordered the village. The trees were heavy with ripening fruit, leaves still glistening with lingering droplets. He ran his fingers along the branches, feeling the vitality within each one. Every tree, branch, and fruit had grown through repeated care, patience, and quiet observation. Life's endurance, he realized, rested on these persistent, deliberate acts rather than sudden exertion. Each small contribution, though unseen, strengthened the larger whole: the orchard, the village, and the natural equilibrium surrounding them. As afternoon deepened, clouds rolled in, signaling another soft shower. Akinosuke climbed a slight rise overlooking the village. From this vantage point, the homes, gardens, and pathways formed a cohesive, interwoven pattern of activity. The daily labor, the careful tending, and the quiet guidance of elders created a resilient, living network. Harmony, he understood, emerged not from grand gestures or sudden brilliance, but from countless small, attentive actions repeated over time. When the rain began, it fell steadily, drumming on rooftops, leaves, and soil. Akinosuke stepped into it, letting the cool droplets soak his hair and clothes. The gentle, persistent rhythm reminded him of the power inherent in consistency, the strength of patience, and the quiet resilience cultivated by ongoing attentiveness. Returning home, he lit the lamp, its warm glow flickering softly across familiar walls. Sitting quietly, he reflected on the stream, the orchard, and the intricate, enduring patterns that sustained the village. Whispering to himself, he said, "True continuity and harmony arise not from grand acts, but from repeated care, mindful effort, and full presence in the everyday." As night descended and the rain continued, Akinosuke closed his eyes, letting its rhythm carry him into rest. He recognized that life's depth was revealed not through extraordinary moments, but through patient, thoughtful engagement with the ordinary acts that weave the fabric of existence. Dawn broke with a tender, golden haze that drifted across the village, softening the contours of rooftops, pathways, and fields. Akinosuke stepped lightly onto the moist earth, feeling the gentle coolness seep through his feet and the faint texture of soil that had absorbed the night's rain. The air was fresh, carrying the mingled aroma of wet foliage, fertile earth, and the subtle sweetness of blossoms newly opened by the first light. Each breath he took seemed to root him in the present, a quiet affirmation that life continued in steady, intricate rhythms, often unnoticed but profoundly enduring. He wandered through the narrow, winding lanes, observing the early activity of the villagers. A woman balanced a bundle of fresh herbs in her arms, moving carefully to avoid bruising their tender leaves. A man tilled a small garden patch, each motion deliberate, measured, and patient. Children ran freely between homes, their laughter fleeting yet vibrant, blending into the soft hum of daily tasks. Elders adjusted tools, repaired fences, and offered quiet instruction to younger villagers, their gestures precise, thoughtful, and patient. Each seemingly ordinary act, Akinosuke realized, contributed to a delicate harmony, sustaining the village.